we've been following your journey, you and Lauren, from pregnancy through now your 2.5 months postpartum. Is that right?
Yep.
And so we've done some interviews, some articles, some newsletters and things, just kind of following because, of course, Lauren is one of our breastfeeding success co-owners and co-founders. And this is just a really cool thing that's happening on our team, for our everyone who knows and loves her. So, and you've been a big, huge piece of this. So this is about kind of hearing your perspective of this whole experience, giving a lot of focus here mainly to this piece that's been the longest, or that will have been the longest in the end, is that postpartum recovery. But to start, like, maybe just kind of go back and recap your experience during pregnancy and birth first. So the pregnancy, so we did an interview with Lauren about, being pregnant at an older age, which she was, being pregnant for the 6th time. And so what all that was looking like for her. But how about for you? What was it like? And this was your first baby, and first time to, walk with someone through the pregnancy and birth and everything. So how was it for you, the pregnancy?
Well, luckily, I took some classes, and, I learned some skills, some ways to help out. But the pregnancy, doesn't go like anything you see on TV, but the main thing is, we were trying to really create an environment, setting for our baby. During it, we've had our midwife there, and she's listening to the baby's heartbeat. And a lot of the focus is on the baby, and it was my job to really focus on Lauren. So I kind of just try to tune in with her. I had a lot of different techniques to try to be there with her. It happened a lot faster than I was expecting, so that was probably a good thing. But I wanted to make sure, I was healthy. I was well nourished, really had my head in the game. And, the main thing is that I was present and able to, pick up on, what Lauren was wanting. That was kind of my main thing. So I knew people were there to protect the baby. So I wanted to make sure I was there to protect Lauren and get her and how she wanted to be, places to be.
I love that. And, before we hit record, we talked some about this, and I loved that you said that you mentioned that, there is so much focus on the baby, and a lot of times people really notice that after the baby comes, but even during pregnancy, so much of the focus is on, like, okay, I have to go to these appointments. They're going to check on the baby. We're doing all these things to make sure the baby's okay. And of course, her health is really important too. But a lot of that comes from the focus on the baby, right? Making sure, like, were we really this interested in how Lauren was eating and sleeping and everything before this, right? Because now it's the baby is dependent on doing a good job here too. And so, so much of the focus for Lauren has to be on, like, making sure my body is in good shape for the baby. And then the doctors and midwives, their care providers also. And so I love that you said this, that you recognized that really your best role here was to focus on Lauren's well-being, mental health, maybe that side of it. Like, how is she handling all this? How is she feeling about all of this? And which, maybe we don't always recognize as being a really critical piece of healthcare, but it is. Her mental health, her stress levels, all that impacts the pregnancy and the birth and even the postpartum recovery. So, you in a way are providing some really important healthcare too. And so you were telling me it was important to you to kind of watch her recognize when she needed a little bit of extra support, when she needed to be able to relax. Maybe you can tell when she was getting a little overwhelmed and she goes quiet, or you started to pick up on those signals. You were being present and picking up on those signals. What kinds of things? And so you said you started to figure out some things that helped her. What kinds of things did you pick up on?
Well, in the classes, you learn all types of different techniques, hip pressing, the balls in the hands. But the ones that were really helping out, where I was like dragging kind of my fingertips down the side of the arms, that seemed to be like number one. The other ones, not so much. And then, words of affirmation, just telling her that, keeping her, because there is pain involved, and pain will take you somewhere else. And, one thing that Lauren and she's like, I want you to keep me here. I want to be present as much as possible. I want to be a part of this birth. And it's so strange to say, but, when you have pain, you kind of go away from it. And my words of affirmation were just, hey, this is your baby coming. We're getting closer to this baby being in this world. And, I'm telling her this stuff. She was nonverbal at the time, but afterwards, she was like, that was like really what helped me,
So during labor, you took some of the things that you learned about her, the things that helped her relax during pregnancy, and you used those during labor as well.
Yeah.
And you guys talked about it, obviously. You talked about, she knew from her past births that she tends to go into another world and kind of check out. And she wanted this time to be able to stay very present. And so she asked you to give her those reminders. And so you'd been paying close attention during pregnancy. So that's something you did then, so that during birth, during labor, you were able to have some tools that ended up being helpful, just having paid close attention and knowing her really well. Right.
Yeah, it is. It's, it's natural instincts start kind of kicking in, when you're definitely in the heat of the moment.
Yeah. So then the birth, you described a lot of it in the birth story interview we did with you and Lauren. But for you, just maybe kind of what kinds of things did you do? What kinds of things did you feel like were priorities? Maybe like leading up to it, or at the beginning, kind of going in order of events there.
Set and setting, I think, is real important. We made sure we had some really handmade, flower arrangements, had candles, the lighting. We didn't have a whole lot of people in the house, just the basic. We had our best friend, her midwife that she's give birth to all the kids with. I had a lot of stuff set out that I thought I was going to use, that didn't even use. We had the balls. We did use a tins machine that seemed to help out a lot too. We had like a birthing sling, and at first when the labor's going on, we went and made like a little porridge that kind of kept our mind, off of it to like let some time pass. And we're just going through almost like stages. There's a birth sling, there's this, and this. And then as it gets going, I'm like gauging her, and she's like, hey, call my friend, get my best friend over here, get the midwife, And so those were important things that I was the duty to get those people over there, and get the room set up. We had everything kind of in the room, but, getting the bed dressed right, and, getting towels like in the area that we're actually going to use. So just really preparing the space, for the birth.
And I loved what you said before, which was like that has a lot to do with your experience and Lauren's experience, like just having a space that feels safe and comfortable, and when it's beautiful, that's helpful too. So it sounds like you had all that ready to go. I just want to recognize that, you can do that wherever you're giving birth. It doesn't have to be a home birth. So even in the hospital, you can change the lighting. You can bring beautiful things that you'd like to look at, and you can make it feel like a very sweet, nice, comfortable place. But you also said, I love this, and I hadn't really thought of it before. I mean, I hear we talk about this in classes, like, yeah, make the room nice. It's good for you for labor, to keep your good hormones flowing, if you feel comfortable and if things are beautiful. But you said we wanted, when the baby opened his eyes for the first time, we wanted him to see beautiful things too. And I just thought that was so sweet. I love that.
Yeah.
And he did.
Learn, yeah. Well, and you learn, their focus and everything, but I could tell, like, and he's still like this. I think the first thing he saw was some like flickering of candles and lights, and he is still just fascinated on that type of stuff. So I think that worked.
Yeah. I love that. And so you felt like that was a big piece of your responsibility, to make sure that everything was there. The room was set up. Everything felt nice, looked nice. You guys had that labor project that you worked on to make this particular dish that you could eat afterwards. It was going to be especially nourishing, but also it just was a way to really spend some time, pass the time, have a distraction while you're waiting for labor to really kick into gear. And not that you had to wait very long, but and then one of your next big responsibilities was to make sure all the right people were there. And
yeah.
So you did that.
Yeah, and you gotta kind of warm them up to it, like, because it was, early morning, and so you hit them up and you're like, hey, water broke, and that, who knows how long that could be till when labor goes, but you're really like, being there, you're looking at her, you're gauging her body, and I could tell, like, it was getting close to the time where, she was starting to retreat back into the bathroom where we kind of had everything set up. And I was like, all right, I think I need to get everybody over here now.
Okay.
And that's kind of tough, because you don't want to have people come over and it's like a 3-hour wait, and also you don't want to wait too long to where they're not there. So that was a little bit of a point of stress, just to make sure you got everybody there and you got their number on your phone.
Yeah, but I mean, it sounds like you did it well. And sometimes the person who's laboring is not a great judge of that, to be honest. I mean, sometimes, yes, they know. Sometimes we just know. But other times people second guess themselves, and they're thinking like, oh, but I know that I'm supposed to be in labor for a certain amount of time and it hasn't been that long. So even though I'm feeling all this intensity, maybe it's not time yet. So I don't want to burden anybody to come too soon. And so we can definitely do that too, and second guess ourselves. But it sounds like you were just really tuned in, like you said, like you learned this in pregnancy, that a big piece of what worked for you and that what was helpful was to stay really tuned in to Lauren and her experiences, her behaviors. You know her so well, and you know that if she gets quiet, that means this, or if, and so you saw some signs. She was retreating into the bathroom, and that was a red flag to you that said like, oh, this is real. And because you were paying attention, you were staying very present. And then you, like you said, you did your preparations, you did your education, you did all these things during pregnancy, and then your instincts just kind of kicked in because you were able to be present. And that's such a good lesson, so important, not so easy to do necessarily, but I love that you said that. And then you said something before too, which was about how you were taking care of yourself so that you could do this too. So, you mentioned that you you hadn't been drinking.
Yeah.
Had been, you were trying to make sure to get good sleep leading up to the birth. You were eating well. You were staying, healthy so that because at any moment labor could start, right? And you wanted to be ready, prepared, and you were.
Yeah.
Right?
And one of the ways we prepared is like we didn't say, hey, let's pretend you're pregnant. What are we going to do? But we would go through a kind of a scenario. And, we had the ball, we had the hit, we had this whole little routine. I was kind of saying, like, as if it's a play. But when the time comes, she didn't want to sit on the ball. She didn't want that. Like everything changes up. And that's when you're really, your natural instincts start kicking in, and you're just, reading her body. You put your hand on her belly, and you can feel like how intense the contractions are, and when you first start feeling those, because that was the first time I really felt them. She was like, oh, I got a contraction, days before or whatever, but at this time now I'm like, oh, I feel that. This is, your body is doing that, so it's coming. And you're kind of just going with the motions at that point. Everything you thought you were going to do, it might not happen that way, but if it lines up, you're ready. You're like, oh, I know how to do the hip compressions, and I did that. And she's like, don't do that. I was like, oh, she was loving that at first, and I found the things that really were helping for her was, rubbing my fingers like down the side of her arms. That seemed to be, that with words of affirmation just really was, and you can't tell, like you can tell it's helping, but it's like afterwards, she's telling me like that was like what I needed, just to hear everything's gonna be okay. This is your baby being born. And it seems like those are big things.
Huge.
Yeah.
Really huge. And it's great that, and I mean, she could tell you that maybe after the birth, but maybe even, I imagine, in between contractions. Maybe she was able to communicate to you like, okay, that thing worked, that thing wasn't, and you were paying attention, and you were changing the game plan as you needed to. Like you said, sometimes things you thought were going to work didn't work.
Yeah.
So you got to find something else, and that's so true. And it's funny because not everyone is able to do that like you did, to shift gears when you need to. Some people just really get fixated on these ideas, like, but we learned this in class, and I'm going to do this thing that I learned in class. But like, as a birth class teacher, I don't want you to do that.
Yeah.
I remember my husband had this like massaging tool that someone in a class told us might be a good idea, right? And I hated the thing, but he just kept like following me around with it. And I was like, but that's not the thing that I want right now. So, but in the moment it can be so hard to shift gears. So it's great that you could do that. Sometimes people will feel a little panicked, a little unsure of themselves. And so I like what you said about your focus being on like, okay, focus on Lauren. What is she saying? What are her signs and signals? What are her actual words? Because sometimes they can tell you in between contractions, like, that was great, that was not, let's try something else. You can always, talk about it, make a plan for that next contraction. So it sounds like you did a lot of that. You said it wasn't as much, you expected it to be a little more muscle and thought work.
Yeah.
But it wasn't. It was mostly just about like being there, open mind, open ears, healthy and ready to do what the next thing was going to be, because, you can't really necessarily plan for that. Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So was there any advice? And it looks like you've already kind of talked about these, but my next question was going to be, was there any advice that you were given before in classes, from your midwife, from other people who have been birth partners, that was given to you that ended up being really helpful?
Well, you gave me one that I'm still sticking with, and it's, the clutter in the kitchen. For some reason, moms they see some dirty dishes and they feel like they have to go do those right now. So just kind of, staying on top of the regular chores and cleaning of the house. I clearing your schedule. You've got 9 months to really get planned for this. And, it's got that could be probably one of the toughest things, is just getting to where your focus is right here in the home, with the mom and the baby, like that's what your focus is on. Making that your priority. Doing the groceries. Those were being present. Those are the things that you had to focus on, really. The work, the shed project in the backyard, like those aren't going on right now, and having that your schedule cleared, dissolved of all other things before this happens, I think is, key, because if your mind is somewhere else, you're not going to be able to pick up on a lot of stuff, because it happens quick. These little things happen. And if you're not looking and touching and being a part of it, you're going to miss out.
Yeah. Okay. So this is more like in the postpartum time after the baby's here. So sorry, I was still in the birth.
Okay.
So in the birth zone. So the advice, so I think during labor and birth, some of the advice that you might have been given for that piece that was most helpful. You mentioned to me before that you said, I think I'm trying to kind of consolidate your words here, but that yes, do a lot of preparation, do a lot of planning, but then when the ball's in the air, when it's actually happening, sometimes you just have to, be flexible and lean on your strengths. And so that was one piece that you said was handy and worked for you. Touch, that you learned that, touching can be very grounding, can be helpful for pain, for all kinds of things, stress relief during labor. And that definitely, you found the kind of touch that worked, rubbing on the backs of her arms like that. Which like I couldn't have planned that. How did you figure that out? I'm kind of curious about that.
When you start seeing, your loved one get so vulnerable like that, that's the thing. If you're truly there, like these instincts that are continuing on, and I'm growing on them now. Like I've never been a father or had to really take care of anybody, but like that was when it first started. I never had to really take care of Lauren until like this moment where she was so vulnerable, and just having her in my hands and talking to her. That's what I think is key. She's giving birth, but she needs you, and you're kind of like a unit, and it's amazing how the unit is 2 and then it becomes 3,
Yeah.
Yeah. Touch and words of affirmation, and coming up with those words of affirmation. I think, that was something we planned. We talked about that. We talked about it a lot. Really, that was one thing we talked about most. I asked her what she was like scared of, and she was scared of not being present at birth, which I didn't understand that at the time. And when you go through that much pain, your brain is like trying to compartmentalize, and like, I'm going to feel this pain over here, but I'm going to feel like this over here. So that was a really important thing to kind of figure out what those words of affirmation were, because you could be saying something that just doesn't even mean anything, but I kept telling her, this pain is bringing you closer to the baby, and there's an end goal here. Like, this pain is going to go. It's not going to last forever, and it's not going to kill you. This is right.
Yeah.
It's easy for me to say, but it seemed like those were the ones that ended up helping her. In my doula classes that we were taking, that was one thing that we went a lot into, and we'd write them down, and then like look at them, and there were some that didn't make any sense, and we threw them out, and it was mostly like, this pain will pass and your baby will come, you know.
Yeah.
There's an end to this.
Yeah, and it's like you said, you were having to really see what was going to work for Lauren, because some of them didn't make sense, right? Some of those affirmations you can look up online don't make sense for you, but they might make a lot of sense to someone else.
Right.
And so you found the ones that really worked for Lauren, and she had some awareness of that ahead of time. So you communicated. I think that's like a huge piece. Like you said, you really talked a lot. You really got to know Lauren in a different way, in these preparations, and that was useful. That ended up being very, very useful. You were able to. She knew in past births that she would check out, right? When things got really intense, she would check out, try to escape. A lot of people do that during labor when things get really intense. Like, I need to get out of here.
Yeah.
Someone else, I need to like leave my body and go somewhere else. And she recognized that was the piece that she wished she wanted to do differently. Like, I want to stay present. I want to stay in my body. And to be able to do that, I need reminders that I'm okay. This is okay. This is normal. What I'm feeling is normal. And it just means that my baby's coming.
Yeah. And knowing that that's important, it gives the father, the man, a place to be, because there's these things that are going on where everybody has their place, you know, especially if you're in the hospital setting, you know, you got the midwife, where's your place? Well, that was my place, you know, and it was behind her, you know, and, you know, finding that place. And it's like, you're needed. It's like, I'm needed here as much as anybody else is needed in this situation.
Yeah. Sometimes even more.
Yeah. Don't let anybody push you out of the way. Like, no, I'm right here.
Yeah.
Because they can't.
You did all the work.
Sometimes, you know, you got to be their advocate at that time, because they're the most vulnerable to ever be.
Yeah. And you know her. You did all that preparation so that you knew her better than anybody.
Yeah.
Right. Besides herself, of course, but you knew you were able to anticipate these needs and provide what she needed at the time. So you're, of course, super, super critical person. So I asked you what was the hardest part of the birth. You remember what you said for that? What was the hardest part?
Oh man, being like just time of labor like that's you don't know when it's gonna happen. Our schedules were so messed up that it was basically a time that I would be asleep, you know. So that was you know, not knowing really when the time of labor is going to be is that's probably the toughest one.
Yeah,
You know?
that the baby gets to decide.
Yeah.
And they don't have the best timing sometimes, right?
Yeah, and I think that's why preparation with your schedule, you know, leading up to there, I was making sure I was getting my 8 hours. I wasn't staying up with them at night. You know, we like to share the same sleep schedule, but you know, I was preparing like an athlete. Like I didn't know what I was getting myself into. I didn't know how strenuous this was going to be, so I didn't want to be tired. I didn't know how long the labor was going to be, so yeah, I was actually trying to get in bed whenever this all started happening. And I'm like, should I try to take a nap right now? And it's like, no. Lauren's like, what are you doing? I was like, I'm just, you know, resting. She's like, nah, you're not resting right now. Okay.
This is happening quicker than anybody thought.
Yeah.
But because you'd been well rested before, it was okay, right?
Yeah.
You ended up.
You can plan on it. You can plan on a lot of stuff, but you can't plan the time.
Yeah. Okay. And then the favorite things about the birth.
Oh, you know, TV, stories, you know, maybe even being a part of, I don't know, but this was the first one that I was there, you know, and it was my child. And yeah, it's like seeing a comet, you know, it's like extraterrestrial. It's just out of this world. That to me was, you know, one of my favorite parts is just being a part of this thing that happens all the time. But when it happens, it changes your life forever. You know, now I see pregnant women or I see a baby. I'm a different person now when I see that. So that right there was, you know, one of my favorite parts. And then another really, really magical part was after the baby was born. And I got Lauren in bed, you know, she's got the baby. She had her best friend sitting on the bed next to her, you know, with their arms like on Lauren. And then her other best friend, which is the midwife, Natalie, sitting there. She's actually like got her belly like on the bed, her feet kicking in the air, and it's like almost they're at a slumber party, you know, like doing their nails, but they're just like focused, like triangulated views like on this baby, and it's like just glowing. And it was like that was beautiful, like to see something like that. That's like it brings them together, and like another that won't ever change, you know. These people are connected.
It is. It's a really connecting experience, isn't it?
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah. And of course, that best friend, Janet, our other owner, co-founder, they've been best friends for a long time. They've been at births for each other many times.
Yeah.
And
Janet's been to everyone, so that's
yeah. I just love that. I love that about my bosses. I think that's just another part of what makes, you know, working here special.
yeah.
Okay. And then the postpartum. So
Okay.
you
Sorry for jumping
already
around
kind
on
of
you.
touched on some of this. No, I didn't make it clear because I'm asking you some of the same questions about different things. But you already said, like, okay, some of your expectations that, and so you mentioned, like, okay, I expected, you know, I was advised, and I expected to keep those dishes clean, right? Keep up with the housework. You expected to have to clear your calendar, to clear your
Yeah.
schedule. You said no more shed, no more working like this, no more doing these things in this, of course, temporarily, not forever, but for this time, for this most critical piece of time, which is temporary. And then you expected to have to change your priorities, right? Like you said, okay, now's not the time to go finish working on this project. Now's the time to give my focus to home and family, because, you know, Lauren's healing and I've got this brand new baby and we have a whole family and a household and everything too. And so you had to shift your priorities, and you're still doing that. That will change, right? But you had that expectation already, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that is brilliant because it makes you more able to stay present. Like you keep saying, I'm able to stay present. You knew these things, you're not fighting these things. And hopefully that's making things more pleasant for you and everybody. And then you said one more thing when we talked before we started recording, but you didn't bring up a minute ago. You expected that this baby was going to grow up quick.
Yeah,
Right?
you always hear that. They grow up fast. They grow up fast. And you know, that's the thing. And they do. And it's these little subtle, you know, at first it's like they know their mouth, you know, and they start figuring out their body and their hands and just, you know, you want to catch all of that, you know. You want to catch these eye contacts and, you know, um changing the diapers, you know. That could be like a magical time, really.
What? Yeah, other stuff will still be there, right? Focus on
Yeah.
this because they grow up quick. So you seem to have a pretty clear understanding, and you had an expectation of that, which not everybody does. I think
Yeah.
sometimes people go into this with the idea of let's hurry up and go back to life as it was before. But you
Mm,
kind of understood that it's not going to be that way, and you don't even want it to be. You want to cherish this time as something special and different.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So some of the things that maybe you weren't expecting. So I asked you that question.
Yep.
Do you remember what some of those were?
There's like one thing you don't think about, but you feel like you're not really needed at the time. And you get this kind of feeling like that the baby doesn't need you, but you realize like, okay, there are these like little subtle things that you are needed. Like even though you didn't give birth and they're not nursing, but you're so part of this situation, and those expectations are so subtle to like pick up on, that can be kind of a tough thing to learn and to realize, like, what am I needed here for,
When you recognize that maybe you weren't needed in the ways you might, it is in as many of the more physical ways, or as much as far as your time goes, that helped you shift your focus to where you were needed the most, which was for Lauren.
Yeah, right? Absolutely. Yeah, you start really getting in tuned in like things that you probably weren't even aware of before, and you're kind of, I wouldn't say you're on your toes, but you're just prepared and ready. It's almost like you've got the belt with all the tools in it, and it's like, oh yeah, and you're just kind of jumping around. It makes you feel really good that you're able to handle these things, and like the feelings you get from like just doing some laundry, and just being there for them too, because they're kind of vulnerable. The baby's super vulnerable. I'm after pregnancy, I mean, it's really, there's a lot of body trauma, and just be able to, bring them water, just comforting them, in these really soft ways, keeping the house kind of calm and quiet. I found, I didn't think about those at the time, but I found that those were, super important.
Yeah. And I like that you recognize that, okay, Lauren's got to focus on the baby the most, because she's breastfeeding and she's the only one that can do that. And that's a great thing. It's really kind of, the way it's designed, it's supposed to be that way, but it means, she has a lot to focus on around the clock. And then you can be there to take care of her, because a lot of times when we're trying to take care of these babies, it can feel all consuming, and maybe we don't take care of ourselves so well. And that matters for us. It matters for the baby, and the whole family. And so you're there to give that focus, and that's just amazing.
Being a positive smile, even whenever you're dealing with the poopy diaper, or just, a crying baby, and it's tough. You almost gotta lie to yourself at first, but it's amazing what just thinking positive about situations that may not seem positive at the time, how it gets traction after a while, and it really changes the outcome. Because I think the baby, Lauren, they pick up on that. If you walk in the room and like they need you for something, you walk in the room like, what do you want? That's not the right way to go. You walk in the room, like, hey, I got a poopy diaper, and you come in like, yeah, I'm here to change that diaper. If you're excited and happy about it, it can go one or either way, and that's the part of the choices that we make, is to, face it with a smile and positive, and it will grow and develop on that.
I love that. I feel like we should end on that. But I wanted to ask you one more thing about breastfeeding. So you shared an experience that right after the baby was born, Lauren got a call from a mom who was newly postpartum and really struggling with breastfeeding. And she took that call and helped this woman. And it gave you some insights that you hadn't had before. Can you kind of share
That
that?
was a pretty intense conversation because I could hear the worry and the pain, because breastfeeding is like this lifeline that I never, I'm watching my baby grow and he's growing and everything that's going in him is coming from her, and that feeling of this lady, she was having a hard time. He wasn't latching. And Cosmos, his tongue is attached, so he doesn't latch that well either. And just having, I'm sure all moms have these expectations that it's just going to be this easy thing, but you have to unlearn what it is that and to like really become one with this baby so that y'all are like learning together what actually works and staying positive about it, and not giving up. Like it was so magical because Lauren's there, she's breastfeeding, this mom's having a hard time, and just having Lauren's giving her words of affirmation, like you're amazing, you can do this, and it can be hard, you know, but keeping that positive outlook. I could tell that the atmosphere over the phone like changed from this dark and gloomy to this like big bright light at the end of the tunnel. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
just having someone that to talk to like that, if it's your mom or a good friend, those seem to be really magical. That was our first night and we were all alone, in bed and getting to hear that. And when Lauren hung up the phone, I was like, you're pretty awesome. You're pretty dang awesome there. You did an amazing thing for that woman,
Yeah. And I mean, if you can have someone like Lauren, a lactation consultant, provide that, that's great. Or like you said, a mom or a friend who can provide that positive kind of support, or a partner, like you said, a partner who recognizes how important this is and that is there to cheerlead you rather than say, oh, well, let's do something else instead, because that can have pretty profound effects on someone's self-esteem, their confidence in their body, so many things. So I just think that's an amazing story. And I think we can end on that. That's I appreciate so much that you were willing to come talk about all these things. These are very personal things, but I think it's going to be so helpful. I think especially for partners to kind of hear it firsthand, and so much empowering stuff here. So thank you.
I really appreciate the time. And there's so much more to talk about in these things, but I was glad to share what I could.
Okay. Thank you so much, Andrew.
Thank you.